Yorkshire Sculpture Park, which I first visited on a school trip when I was 7, and I've now been here 22 years. Just to let everyone know, this event is being recorded and we have had some requests for circulation, so we'll keep you posted on that. YSP is delighted to host this online presentation of land art, referencing the new book, Garden Parks, Collections, Networks and Public Art, and looking at contemporary Tuscany's talent for environmental art. YSP is a cultural partner for the project, and understandably sculpture is something we are incredibly passionate about, and we have the privilege of delivering world-class indoor and outdoor sculpture exhibitions. Today is a unique opportunity for us to look at the international stage, reflect and learn from our peers. I'll soon be handing over to Associate Professor Anna Mazzanti, Editor of Gardens, Parks, Collections, Networks and Public Art, and an expert in contemporary art and spaces. The publication explores the complexity of artistic signs in the cities and landscapes of Tuscany. This famous Italian region welcomes a great variety of open-air works of art, often integrated into the context and regeneration of landscape. The volume is the result of numerous scholars' work engaged in an in-depth mapping of places and works. After hearing from Anna, we will have an opportunity for some questions and answers, so please do submit any questions you'd like to in the Q&A box. I'll now hand over to Anna. Thank you, Anna.
Anna, I can't hear you now.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Do you see the screen? Okay. So it's a really pleasure to be here. We are very happy. I, as a curator of the book, and the Foundation Il Giardino di Daniel Pheby, with the president here, Barbara Raderscheid, for this opportunity gave by important and famous international garden and open-eye museums as Yorkshire Sculpture Park. We really thanks to the director, to Helen, Pheby, and even to the last director, Peter Murray, because he decided to approve his partnership with us. And we know him in Tuscany very well as a good friend of Giuliano Gori, who is one of the most far-sighted mind contemporary collectors in Tuscany, but actually in Italy. Here he has been a promoter of site-specific in the nature, and so of a specific artistic practice now called in Italian arte ambientale. I want to, of course, thanks our doesn't go on. Yes, our sponsor. Mainly the main sponsor, Italian Council, that is a project supported by the Directorate for Contemporary Creativity of Italian Ministry of Culture, and even the Banking Foundation of Florence, Fondazione Cassa di Risparmio, last but not least, even the support by the Office of Culture of the region of Tuscany. Here you find listed all of our cultural partners around Europe. I want to start from the point of view of one of our authors, the anthropologist Pietro Clemente. He writes about the increasingly widespread tourism without culture, thinking to the image of Florence, for example, like in these slides, as a city of stereotyped Renaissance, while for the anthropological tourist approach, the visit is concentrated on the way of people's lives. He remembers some words by a famous Italian writers of history, Gramsci, who in his private notebooks says that Tuscany played an important role until the 19th century, but since the 20th century has no real role in national culture and lives above all on the arrogance of memories past. In Italia is very strong, boia dei ricordi passati. So now I'm able to introduce even the title of this conference. Is a title trick. Actually, this is not the book title. The book title is this. You can see now the cover of the book. Gardens, Parks, Collections, Networks, Public Art, Contemporary Tuscany's Talent for Environment Art. Land art, why we introduced this very abused words, because of course we don't speak in the book about land art as the American 60s traditional landscape movement, with its peculiar message. We instead of speaks about art in Tuscan land, a wonderful land, not that of the stereotypied Tuscany. Of course, something that introduced a new way to consider Tuscany as a famous, important region for the tourists, but in contemporary way. Anyway, before speaking of the significant landscape and its dialogue with contemporary open-eye art, I introduce you to the features and the content of the book. This is Tuscany, you know, in the middle of Tuscany, of Italy. So the book is composed by three parts: a collection of critical essays get into different points of view, a mapping chapter, a sort of a travel guide through the 10 provinces of Tuscany, including geographical maps, links to website addresses and contacts, and an appendix dedicated to the wine cellars by famous architects, considering them as a large-scale signs integrated into the landscape. We have 17 of these wine cellars. The aspect of travel guide makes these books small in size, of course, easy for transportations. Its first character is to be a mapping of the richest network of environmental art in Italy to the 10 provinces, 10 territories, clearly in evident from colors, chromatics, distinctive connotation of the territories, as well as keywords allow it to soon recognize the main peculiarities of the word. And of course, by the numerous scholars' voices. We worked in 16 people, and among them 14 women. I want to underline this. The book, so, intends bringing the reader's attention back to the artistic intervention in the landscape, urban and non-urban, involved into a beautiful environment, such as intervention to ephemeral, social, practical directions. That is the new frontiers of contemporary art, you know, but always valid, even recognized. A connection of the artistic science that lasts over time and current signal in an epoch that often seen the value of nature forgotten, and that little applies to caring for the planet. So we take care a lot of the what we can consider like culture, and we think we have something in common with your park and your institution. Now we can go on very shortly through some pages of the book to understand how much is the variety of works in this situation. Books, public art, site-specific, even street art. At the beginning, we didn't think to include muralism and street art, but in the end, after 2 years of work, we decided to include, because now I don't know exactly what happened in England, in Great Britain, but now in Italy we have a really increase of these and a lot of interest in the cultural and political strategies of the public offices. For example, 2 years ago was born the first public office dedicated to public art as street art in Milan, in Italy, and even, of course, wine cellars. But I want to underline some questions. Why in Tuscany we have so richness, and how it is possible this renewal of the Tuscany image through these contemporary presences? What does this phenomenon depend on? There are many questions. We try to underline and show you some of them. There are some historical events very important in Tuscany. I show you pictures by two. On the left, you have a picture by a famous revolutionary exhibition, Volterra 73. That came had place in Volterra, a small village, very touristic village, in 1973, and was a revolutionary exhibition because for the first time in Italy, art takes to the streets out of the exhibition spaces, and citizens became involuntary visitors. Otherwise, a very important project for the development of environment, the network of the environment art in Tuscany, was the experience started by Giuliano Gori. Art spaces at the beginning of the 80s became one of the important model for what happened later in Tuscany, but even around the world. And we know that there is a very close connection between the Yorkshire Sculpture Park and the work promoted by Giuliano Gori. This is probably the reason because we asked to be our partner, cultural partner for this presentation. Other important things, of course, depends on the beautiful landscape of Tuscany that built from human and nature cooperation. You see now, particular from the famous fresco by Lorenzetti in the municipality historical building in Siena. You see, from the medieval to contemporary, you see the same landscape cut by human design. This work is a wonderful work by Daniel Buren close to Siena, and is perfect to show you the challenge to integrate artistic science into the human designed landscape from the past, interpreting nature and artistic science together. Tuscany, it's very interesting for artists, even for strong traditions, for crafts, material, and traditions, of course. The marble, for example, and Daniel Buren decided to create the frame of this work using marble from Carrara and green from Prato. Of course, we have even important activity by promoter, curators, collectors, dealers engaged great visionary mental openings. And now we have almost then 1,000 works in this 10 provinces divided around the Tuscany. But we can understand, and we realize it very well working to the mapping, that the regions is divided in curiously in a different vocation. On the north, we have these famous important art spaces by Gori. In the middle, we have a network in public art and in widespread museums, public, like which one Martina later speaks you. And in the south, we have 4 artistic parks. So it's like a vision, the situation very organized, but for case, not for the organization, because many different situation comes and they work themselves alone. And now we want to drive you to some excellent, just to show you something about this complex situation. Of course, I already spoke a lot about our spaces of Celle. Near Pistoia, the owner is the industrial and collector Gori, is probably the main international site-specific art collection, thanks to the landscape peculiarities, romantic forests by 19th century, romantic forests in the model of the English one, great olive grove and vineyards. The balance and the organic work is perfect here, and the atmosphere is unique. Every site-specific work is born after a long period of approach and habit of the artists to the place. Look at some example, for example, this this theater by Beverly Pepper, or the work of Staccioli. Staccioli, I choose Staccioli because he's Italian. He worked in Celle since the beginning of the birth of this collection outside in site-specific way. And even because he gives us the opportunity to underline that mapping Tuscany Open Air Network means even to recognize artists' map through the territory, because they worked in several different situations. As you've seen, Staccioli worked even in Giardino di Daniel Spurri, and you can see several view in several seasons to underline, but you know very well in Yorkshire Sculpture Park that we are not inside of a white cube, but we are inside of a very lively place where the work of art continuing to have life in real connection and transformation with the landscape. And in widespread museums, and even in the city, in the connection with this is a whole view of the Museo Peci. Now it's completely different and renewed, but the science comes in the cities also. And I want also to show you, even because we speak in a play in a country where Henry Moore we know is very important. That Henry Moore was very important even for the history of environmental art in Tuscany. And for him also, he had a solo exhibition in 1972 in Florence, and a wonderful exhibition in Forte Belvedere, where that is in the top of the hill inside of the city, and the works are in a connection directly with the skyline of the historical Renaissance city. So there, Henry Moore discovered the importance of the environment around his work and the connection that his culture could have with the spaces. And the city of Prato bought this work that was the mark of the exhibition and put inside of a round traffic point, and this became like the first important contemporary monument in the city, public art for Tuscan. And still in Prato is important. For example, this is the last one public art work by Loris Cecchini that set place in this last summer in Prato. But I just want to show you even a new way, because mapping, we had the territory, we had the opportunity to reflect even the evolution, like in the book Alessandra Pioselli does of the contemporary public art. This is a special garden close the river in Florence, the Arno River, that is ecosystems. The author are the architect, designer, artist that realized a third garden inspired to the third landscape of Gilles Clement, creating a space like to save the ecosystem for nature and plants. So in the heart of Florence, so touristic, stereotypied Renaissance city now today, you can feel and smell the nature. You can listen the voice of birds. But now I want to leave the floor to Martina Marolda to speak about a little of one of the most important collections by widespread museums in the region. Martina, for you.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning to all of you. Just to introduce myself, I'm an art historian and I work for a non-profit organization in San Gimignano called Culture Attive. My cultural association deals, among other things, with the conservation and the valorization of public art through participatory paths and educational projects for young people and students. I live in Val d'Elsa. The Val d'Elsa area develops along the Elsa River, and it is between Siena and Florence, with an agricultural and industrial vocation that boasts a widespread art system throughout the territory, thanks to the quality historical project, which have brought international artists and curators. The first, called Affinità, 5 artisti a San Gimignano, so Affinità, 5 artists in San Gimignano, 1991 to 1994. And the second, you can see this, Arte all'Arte, 1996 to 2005. Born in some cases as ephemeral projects, they then left permanent works and therefore a stable physical value in dialogue with the territory, with both the urban and natural context. So the Val d'Elsa area is a territory made up of small municipalities such as San Gimignano, Poggibonsi, Colle Val d'Elsa, but also Casole d'Elsa and Radicondoli, rich in medieval and Renaissance history, but also in a rapid and aesthetically uneven urbanization after the Second World War. So Val d'Elsa is therefore not the great extracting centers of Siena and Florence, however close it may be. And contemporary art in public space represents an important eminence capable of giving value to this provincial territory. Recently, the municipalities are making agreements for set up a widespread art museum for this territory. So here you can see just few examples of work present in this area, thanks to the Arte all'Arte project. In Poggibonsi, you can see Anthony Gormley with 7 humanoid sculptures titled Making Space, Taking Place. We are in 2004. And then Mimmo Palladino with The Sleepers, I Dormienti. Here we are in the medieval Fonte delle Fate, so you can see sculpture and historical architecture both together. And then in Colle Val d'Elsa, we have the Umoca by Saiko Kiang. Umoca is underground museum of contemporary art. That is a museum that takes advantage of the historic architecture of the San Francisco Bridge in Colle Val d'Elsa. And then So Lewitt with his entitled work in the garden of the Archaeological Museum. That is a clear dialogue between the concrete blocks and the medieval architecture of the towers, which are typical of this area. And just to finish, we can go to San Gimignano. That is the place where I work, with Kiki Smith with the sculptures color steel, called color steel, in the Rocca of Monte Staffoli, that is the ancient part of San Gimignano. And finally, Anish Kapoor with Underground in the Torrione of Sant'Agostino. this is a very particular kind of public art for this territory, and we are very proud of it.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you very much. And we go on for finish, speaking about another peculiarity of art in art, contemporary art in outside in Tuscany. A significant increase, and is also identifying the specificity of artists' gardens. Two high-quality projects among the others. I want to show you Tarot Garden, very famous garden by Niki de Senfal, devoted to Gaudí, of course, but even capable of integrating into the natural context and also taking inspiration from it as an urban conformation. This is Capalbio, is the close village to the garden in the south of Tuscany, where Niki de Senfal created this wonderful imaginary city. Now I'm happy to give the floor to the president of Il Giardino di Daniel Spurri, that I want to remember he's the main promoter of this book, Barbara Raderscheid. She's the president, and she's also the director, the president of the Foundation of Daniel Spurri in Vienna. Barbara, are you there?
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. When Helen Pheby at the very beginning said that she visited the Yorkshire Sculpture Park first when she was 7, I have to say I have visited the Giardino. I met Daniel Spurri when I was 18, and I visited the Giardino first in 1997, which is some time ago, and I didn't suppose to become president of this beautiful foundation. It was not a foundation then in 1997, but shortly afterwards it became a foundation and was opened to the public. Still growing then, because it is a garden. A garden is too small a word, too little a word for it. It's 16 hectare area of the size of 16 hectare, and it is still growing, which means it does not become bigger, does not become more than 16 hectare, but Daniel Spurri is adding new installations still. And these installations are not only his own works, but he has invited artist friends and has involved those friends into this wonderful adventure, let's say, to create an artist garden. I would like to refer to what has been said in the book, and it has often been said that artists have always or ever since been attracted by the beautiful Tuscan landscape. And this is surely true when we remember Mauro Staccioli's steel ring, through which we look at an area of outstanding beauty. But coming back to Daniel Spurri, I want to tell you a little anecdote, because he showed me a place. It is near a motorway of, let's say, 30 cypress trees in the middle of an empty field, and you go by car, you pass by car, and this place is always surrounded by photographers, because it's so typical. There are cypress trees, there is a field, there is a hill slope, and Daniel Spurri would say, "Look, this is Tuscany." You can see from this ironic remark, rather ironic, very typical for him, that it was certainly not the landscape, not the scenery that attracted him. In fact, it was for biographical reasons that he moved from Paris to Tuscany, to Italy, because he was married to a young lady then, and she wanted to live in Italy. So it is no surprise that at the very beginning, he did not think of creating a sculpture park. But after the houses had been renovated, it did not take very long, and he would install or put one column, his first sculpture, into the garden, into this park. And shortly after, shortly after he would invite artist friends. This is an example by with a work by Eva Epley, maybe his oldest friend beside Jean Tinguely. And the Giardino hosts the complete astrological work by Eva Epley, which is extraordinary. The only place where it can be found is in Omaha, in Nebraska. So this already is a reason for going or visiting the Giardino. This is a typical typical work by Daniel Spörri, one of his famous snare pictures. It is called, can we go back for a minute? A snare picture, which means it is a tableau piège in French. It is an accidental situation found by the artist and fixed by the artist and then put to the wall as a still life. He has become famous for these. So of course there was a bronze version of these representing this group of works of Daniel Spörri, very important at the very beginning of the Giardino. The numeration, the numbering of the installations in the Giardino is chronological. So we had this very first sculpture put in the garden was number 1, and we can go on now. And there is number 43, and it is a whole chamber made of bronze. It's a bronze construction inside. It represents the hotel room in which Daniel Spörri lived at the beginning of the 1960s in Paris. And it was there where the place where the tableau piège was born. It was there where he invented this gluing down objects on a given surface and made it a tableau piège, a snare picture. So this is now in the center of the garden. And this too is a matter of chance that we find it in the center, but it's like the nucleus of not only of the garden, but of Daniel Spörri's career as an artist, a visual artist. So this is quite emblematic and symbolical as well. And he refers, if not to the beauty of the scenery in Tuscany, but he refers very much to its history. He has visited Bomarzo in very early times, and he saw the inclined house at Bomarzo, and in the same way, he had this bronze chamber, the chambre numéro 13, which we saw before. It is always inclined in 2 directions. So if you enter into this bronze chamber in the Giardino, you get dizzy because there is an inclination, which is certainly being inspired by Bomarzo. This is for sure. What could I tell you at the very end? There's Danny Caravan. So there are big names, important names, famous artists who Daniel Spörri invited, and less known, there are names which you might never have heard of, but also their works belong to the favorites of our visitors in the Giardino. The fact that Danny Caravan worked on an olive tree gives me the opportunity to remark that the Giardino as well is a place where olive trees are still being grown and harvested. And we have a wonderful olive oil, very typical for this region, which we would have presented if we could have met in person. And unfortunately, this is not the case now, but I hope very much to come to Yorkshire Sculpture Park once in a little group, and then we will bring a bottle of olive oil. Thank you for having invited us this way.
Thank you, Barbara. Yes, next time we come and we take our Tuscan bruschetta with the olive oil. by the garden. But I want to underline a little more about Danny Caravan. He's an important artist. So we decided to finish with him because he's really an example of an environmental artist, and his contemporary message for the piece. He passed away, you know, a few years ago, but his message is really important and really contemporary for the coexistence between thoughts and culture, between human design and natural design. Caravan, you know, is from Israel, and he's also was a very close friend of Gaudi, who introduced the first his site-specific work in this collection, and he showed the capacity of the artist to read like an architect the nature and the line for the visitor, give the visitor a potential new view of the landscape. And he loved so much Tuscany. He lived in Tuscany. This is the work in art spaces in Celle, and he had here many very so close friends. And we are really think that his work there as well as in the garden, so mimetical of the natures, means the message of the sustainability of the planet, and a real message for the present and for the future. So thank you very much for your attention, and we are open to every questions you and information you want to know. The book is soon printed. The editor is Liori, and from the Garden of Daniel Spurri website and from the Liori, it will be possible to buy this book. Thank you very much for your attention.
You would have to put on the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna and Martina and Barbara, for your presentations. It's really fascinating. It's always really fascinating to see how other sculpture parks and open air sculpture initiatives, what are different and what are the same. We certainly don't have olive oil, so we'll be very grateful for that. And I suppose I have a couple of questions. I don't want to cut across anybody else, but what advice would you give to an artist who's wanting to create sculpture for the open air? Because we get asked this a lot, and I think it's quite a different mindset, also practical, very different. So I wonder what advice you would give to a young artist who's thinking about emerging out of their studio like Henry Moore did and go into the open air.
Do you want? Maybe it's easier to speak about the special. I would like that Barbara starts about the gardens, Giardino Daniel Spurri, and I have open a larger view.
Well, I could say that as for referring to Daniel Spurri, when he decided to, he would not have been able to put his tableau piège, his snare pictures outside because they are real objects, of course. And this was made possible by a wonderful friendship with a bronze caster who could realize these works in bronze. It was, but it was not that he intended, now I want to go outside, and how can I do? But it's always a dialogue. If a young artist, not speaking of Daniel Spurri, one feels attracted by presenting something outside, it could also be ephemerical. Does it exist in English? So there are many installations who stay there only for a while and would disappear afterwards. So there's no recipe, certainly not.
Yes, we've worked with Andy Goldsworthy, who quite famously makes ephemeral and permanent work. And for Andy, it was about learning the materialness. So understanding the sandness of sand or the leaf of the leaf. It was like getting to know the real materiality of things that were around him. And then that career has grown obviously to make big permanent interventions, but he still every day makes ephemeral works. He goes off and it's not just part of his practice, it's part of who he is, really, to connect to the world in that way.
Yes, and this can be preserved in films, but it is meant to disappear, like some works by Dieter Roth, for example. And I would like to add something, because Daniel Spörri often said, not only artists, but especially he himself, and as all mankind, he would say, is jealous of nature because it comes and goes and renews itself, which is not possible, not even for an artist.
Interesting. And Henry Moore said that it was the job of artists to show people nature. So for him, it was all about opening people. And I don't know about you, but we get a sense that when people visit here, their eyes are bigger. So they look at a tree in a different way, or they look at a rock in a different way. And I think that's what Moore was saying, really.
And I think this question could be a discussion for a conference for 2 days. But I think I would like to say two things. One, that Tuscany is a real microcosm in which you can see actually the development and the different point of view and approaches from ephemeral and connected with sustainability for today and very contemporary problems and necessities, to the historical way to consider culture in the modern, in the contemporary approach. So we really have a lot of different opportunity to see this. But about the artists' parks, it's a really special situation, because you can see directly this, for example, this topic from the point of view of artists in a complex work inside of the nature, in a really, it's like a history connected with a landscape, and you have from bronze to the ephemeral and plants, a different approach. And the events Barbara told is like not a battle, but a real deep dialogue with nature. It's the same for Niki de Saint-Phal, and it's very, very interesting to visit these parks from this point of view. Otherwise, in Tuscany, then I leave the word to Martina. The important Institute for Restorations from the States, Opificio delle Pietre Dure, has since several years, sponsored by the Banking Foundation, the same sponsored our book, special master's course for restoration of contemporary art, and they are focusing in the nature, and they are working, the students, the postgraduate students, they are working in this topic. So there is an special attention, of course, with the so rich network we have.
That sounds really interesting, and it's probably something we should access, because it's a challenge to find conservators with different specialisms for, quite experimental materials often as well. And I know that for Henry Moore, putting work in a landscape and a natural setting, and for Hepworth, was actually quite a political act as well. And I don't know if that's true of the artists that you've worked with and whose estates you've worked with, in the sense that there was a feeling that a white cube space or a museum space was quite an elitist space historically. So it was a space that not everybody felt perhaps welcome to go into. It may be different completely in the Italian context, but by so Henry Moore wanted it to be like Stonehenge, something that was just part of people's lives, and that everybody felt permission to appreciate and to engage with. And he actually saw Stonehenge when he was a student, and he was too excited to wait until the morning, so he saw it by moonlight. and that influenced a huge amount of prints that he did. Every time he represented Stonehenge, it was often with this very sort of moody lighting. And then we were able to offer, inspired by that, a moonlight walk of Henry Moore's in the landscape here, which is not something you could do in a gallery, and it just opens up a whole other way of engaging with art and sculpture.
Yeah, we also have something similar in some places.
Yeah.
Martina, do you want to say, because I know that in the widespread museums in Valdezza they take care of the conservation and even the importance. Conservation means not only to conserve and take care of the materials, but the approach of the communities and how much the communities take care of the places and recognize themselves in there. You want to say something, Martina, about this?
Yes, sure. The municipalities and the organization on the territory are engaging to promote this patrimony, contemporary patrimony, and public art. The public art of the 90s maybe wasn't so didn't have a direct relationship with citizens. It was maybe sometimes a process from top to bottom. So nowadays we are thinking about promote this public art on the territory, especially to young people, and with laboratory and workshops, and it is so useful to become also active citizens of our territory.
Yes, they have a strong educational program with the schools, with the children now, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, and something that we realise is every artist we work with or who we research historically mentions at least one teacher that inspired them and made them think they could be who they were, their potential. And so that's something we do a lot of work with local teachers and not just like actually, but national teachers CPD, and encouraging teachers. And I don't know what the situation is in Italy, but in England, creative subjects have really been cut in the national curriculum. So in schools, there's a lot less creative opportunity. And so we see that what we are doing is trying to provide that, because often perhaps somebody who isn't very academically, who doesn't enjoy academic subjects as much, often they can be very creative. And if we don't nurture that and allow people to fulfill their potential, then we're denying them that opportunity to contribute to society. So it's something we see really strongly, how important the schools program is. I mean, I'm evidence on, I suppose, of how inspiring a school visit can be.
Might also be too inspiring. I remember an occasion because when Daniel Spöll was in the garden, he's not always there, but there was a group of young people and they were being shown around, and Daniel Spöll was there and spoke a few words, and they were deeply impressed. You could see that from their faces, and the teacher would say, "Good gracious, now they all want to become artists."
I think that's wonderful, though, because everybody is an artist, aren't they?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, thank you.
And this is, may I add one thing? This is a great advantage, I think, of those, at least of Daniel Spöll's garden, but of many others. Maybe less for Niki de Saint-Phal's park, because it concentrates on art. But Spöll has always said that he wants to somehow to hide the installations, not to show them off in the middle of a lawn, and he wants them to be discovered by our visitors. And in fact, there are many visitors who are not the least interested in art, especially not in contemporary art. And for them, the visit is nevertheless worthwhile, because they have a wonderful, there are many things to look at, and we also have a botanical percorso, itinerary, thank you. So even wives who are interested in art and would bring their husbands, they all, both of them will have a wonderful day at the Giardino. And this is true for many other places as well, I suppose.
And for
Yes,
children,
absolutely.
for example, we worked many years ago. We realized that a book for children by a drawer for children, and was a story of two boy and girl. They went around these gardens like a place of a wonderland, and they could explore, and they could send postcards to friends, writing what they liked more. And of course the garden was the gardens, these gardens were showed from the size and from the eyes of children. And later we created like a map of treasures and interactions with teachers to looking for. And in the Danish Prairie Garden is perfect because it's 70 hectares and works, more than 100 works are spread around and you have to discover, even for adults in the end, it's something like this. And in the same, I don't know exactly in Yorkshire Sculpture Park is the same, but in these gardens and the streets, museum territory is the same. You don't have a room one from room 11, the strict itinerary. You can go around where you want, and as Niki de Saint-Phal said, it's like in a play of cards. You have to play your card everywhere you want.
Nice. No, we have exactly the same approach where you can only see one or two sculptures at a time, and then you might see another and it draws your attention, and it feels as though, feels very naturalistic and organic, as though they're grown there, I suppose, in some ways. Well, thank you so much. I think we'll wrap up there, but it's been fascinating. So thank you to all the speakers, and thank you so much to Amy for coordinating and organising as well on our side. It's gone very smoothly. And Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you. Same to you. It was a pleasure.
It was
Take care.
pleasure, and Merry Christmas to all of you also in England and Great Britain.
Thank you too. Merry Christmas.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
You.
Bye.
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 Bye.